We'll bring this meeting to order. Will our board secretary please start us off?
Absolutely. Okay, let's do roll call. Director Penn, Dwyer, Anzini, Mansfield, and Day present. General Manager Vandier present. General Counsel Polson present. Board Clerk Ditmore present. President Anzini, all directors are present. A quorum is established.
Thank you. We'll stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Director Dwyer, you want to start us off?
I will. Thank you. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. We'll go to item number B for adopting the agenda.
We'll now open public comment on the adoption of today's agenda. If you're present in the boardroom and wish to speak, please come to the microphone and state your name for the record.
I'll move
Yes, we
adoption
do.
of the agenda.
Second.
I got ahead of you all. Sorry about that. All right. Now we will open public comment on the adoption of today's agenda. If you're present in the boardroom and wish to speak, please come to the microphone and state your name for the record. Virtual participants may refer to the instructions provided on the first page of today's agenda.
All right.
President Anzini, does not appear that any member of the public is wishing to speak. Would you like me to call for the vote?
Yes, please.
Okay. We have a motion to adopt today's agenda moved by Director Mansfield and seconded by, I believe, Director Penn. We're ready for the vote. Great. Motion passes.
Okay. All right, we'll move to item number C.
Okay. This is public comment regarding items not on the agenda. We'll now open public comment on items not on today's agenda. If you are present in the boardroom and wish to speak, please come to the microphone and state your name for the record. Virtual participants may refer to the instructions provided on the first page of today's agenda. President Andini, it does not appear that any member of the public is wishing to speak regarding matters not on today's agenda. We're ready to move on to communications.
Okay, thank you. We'll move on to communication. This makes it easy having you here.
Good morning. For General Manager Communications, I have a few items to cover. The first is awards and recognition. The district received a message from Rick Pender expressing appreciation for EID park rangers who recently assisted them after they became lost in the Pinecone Strip area. The visitors shared that the rangers safely guided them back to their vehicle and provided support during a difficult situation. Their professionalism, compassion, and commitment to public safety reflect the district's guiding principles and dedication to serving the community. I have a few updates related to staff reports and other items. So staff attended the Water Forum 2050 signing celebration on May 11th in Sacramento. The event recognized the culmination of 5 years of regional collaboration, analysis, negotiation, and shared vision, resulting in the Water Forum 2050 agreement, which was signed by President Anzini on behalf of the district. I have a few items to update on board assignments. The first is the Irrigation Management Workshop. Staff continue to participate in planning efforts for a workshop focused on irrigation management services in collaboration with El Dorado Water Agency, the Resource Conservation District, and local growers. Coordination efforts are ongoing. Grant opportunities update. Staff are working to incorporate grant-related updates into future quarterly financial presentations to the board. This will allow us to include information on pending, recently awarded, and potential grant opportunities. The next item on debt reporting, presentation clarification. In response to board discussion regarding long-term debt reporting, staff will continue reporting the pension obligation bonds separately from other long-term debt obligations in district presentations where applicable. And then the last item is related to debt service ratio discussions. Staff plan to include discussion regarding the district's operating budget to debt service ratio, including comparisons to industry standards, as part of the year-end budget projections presentation anticipated later in the year. And that concludes my updates.
Great, thank you. Does any board members have any questions for the general manager report? No? All right. We would, here's an opportunity for board directors. Director Dwyer, you want to announce something?
Yeah. Just quickly, I met with the general manager, council, and staff, and the management of the Cameron Park Estates Road Association, HOA. And the concern was our Strolling Hills pipeline, the last piece of our collection system. And we left, I think, in a favorable status. We're going to come up with a memorandum of understanding. They were concerned about damage to their roads and traffic control and safety. So I think council is resolving those issues for us. Thank you.
Great report. Director Penn?
Last week, I attended the County Wildfire Prevention Program East Planning Area meeting. So the county, through the Office of Wildfire Prevention and Resilience, has completed their CWPP, which is the guiding document for fire prevention and exemplifies the multi-agency and multi-jurisdictional approach to protecting the county from fire. I'm happy to say that both Brian and Seth were there to present on EID's participation, and I'm most appreciative, but it's also indicative of how EID is a fully integrated part of this community and working toward protecting us against wildfire. So again, I'm appreciative that you're spending a good deal of an evening last week up in Pollock Pines, so thank you.
Great. Yes, Director Day.
Yes, I do.
On May 6th this year, the Folsom Dam celebrated its 70th anniversary. And this is a cigarette lighter that my grandfather received. He was the general manager of the Sacramento Chamber of Commerce back then. And of course, what do you give back in the 1950s to everybody to remember something? It's a cigarette lighter, right?
Yeah, go with the
So
cigarettes.
I thought I'd share that with everybody, and well, I'll pass it around. Anybody wants to take a look at it. I don't think he ever used it. He was a smoker, but I think he saved that, and it's been passed down to me. And I just thought it'd be fun to share a little bit of history. So thank you.
The real Zippo, that was before they had knockoffs, right?
Yeah.
Thank you for the show and tell. Nothing. And I will report that I attended the legislative forums at the state capitol as a representative of EID from Mountain County Water. And it was a fairly good day. The weather was nice downtown Sacramento, wandering through the capitol. But it was an interesting dog and pony show, I would call it, where there was 15 Mountain County water reps. This is from all the Sierra Mountain groups. And assembly and senators would come in and talk to us. And so we would have a 30 minutes question and tell our stories. And of course, the big win for almost all the stories was how we did well with the Caldor Fire and Sly Park Reservoir, on how it was so well prepared that that fire went over the Sly Park Reservoir because of mitigations that we made. And they were kind of surprised because a lot of the legislators who came in were not from our area. Most of them are in urban areas and down south. And so trying to talk to them about how several legislation pieces that impact Mountain County water agencies, including the fleet, electric vehicle issues, which many Mountain County water agencies just say it's not going to work to demand electric vehicles in the mountain areas, especially when there's a lot of snow. And many of the Calaveras and Tuolumne, and even up in Nevada Irrigation District, all of them were saying, this just is not going to work. You have to kind of bend the rules for. So I think our participation in that kind of level is always very beneficial, because when a legislator hears our story directly, then they understand. And there was not just directors that were there were several general managers who also were able to speak about the issues that laws are doing. So it was beneficial for an observation and to participate. So I think it's really important that that happens. So thank you. So now we will move on to approving the consent calendar.
Before we entertain a motion for the consent calendar, I'd like to pull item number 2 and 3 for separate consideration.
Okay.
I'll move consent item, I'll move the
Consent item 1.
Move the consent calendar, consent items, whatever, the absent items 2 and 3.
Okay.
Second.
All right. So it's been motioned to approve and seconded.
Yes. We will now open public comment on the approval of the consent calendar minus items 2 and 3. If you're present in the boardroom and wish to speak, please come to the microphone and state your name for the record. Virtual participants may refer to the instructions provided on the first page of today's agenda. President Anzini, it does not appear that any member of the public is wishing to speak on the approval of the consent calendar. Would you like me to call for the vote?
Yes.
All right. We have a motion to approve the consent calendar as amended, minus items 2 and 3, moved by Director Day and seconded by Director Penn. We're ready for the vote.
Okay.
All right, motion passes.
Thank you.
Move consent 2 and 3.
Second.
Okay.
I'll be recusing from voting on these 2 items. I think my company has a contract with Matt Veerkamp Vineyards, and although the ownership is, although the businesses are separate and distinct, Matt Veerkamp Vineyards and Doug Veerkamp Incorporated shares common ownership, so I will abstain from voting.
Okay, thank you.
To the motion?
So we will now take public comment on items 2 and 3. If you're present in the boardroom and wish to speak, please come to the microphone and state your name for the record. Virtual participants may refer to the instructions provided on the first page of today's agenda.
Did we forget public comment on the consent calendar?
No.
You got it? Okay.
No.
Thank you. President Anzini, it does not appear that any member of the public is wishing to speak on the approval of consent items 2 and 3. Would you like me to call for the vote?
Yes.
Okay. We have a motion for item number 2 is to ratify the warrant registers and board and employee expense reimbursements for the periods ending May 5th, May 12th, May 19th, and May 26th, 2026, and the automated clearinghouse payments for the periods ending April 30th, May 6th, May 13th, and May 20th, 2026. And for item number 3, to ratify the resolution number 2025-039 to maintain the emergency declaration for the Reservoir 1 Floating Cover Emergency Replacement Project, project number 25040.01. Both were moved by first by Director Penn, seconded by Director Day. And Director Mansfield has recused himself from these items and will not be voting. We are ready for the vote. All right, and motion passes.
Okay, now we will move on to G, public hearings. Item number 7.
Good morning, Board. Good morning, Board. Patrick Calvis, Engineering Manager. Thank you. Today, we're here for the adoption of the 2025 Urban Water Management Plan and Water Shortage Contingency Plan. This is a public hearing. Before I jump in, a lot of these slides will be repeat content from the workshop in April, so just as a preview for the board. So previous board actions: in June 2021, the board adopted a resolution approving the 2020 cycle of the plan. In October of last year, the board awarded a contract to our consultant in San Jero to prepare the 2025 cycle of the plan. And then in April, as I mentioned, we all participated in a workshop for the 2025 cycle of the plan. So summary of the issue: the Urban Water Management Planning Act requires that this plan be updated every 5 years by purveyors that deliver over 3,000 acre-feet of water annually or serve more than 3,000 customers, both of which the district does. So background, so what does the document do? It's a foundational planning document, and really it summarizes the long-term adequacy of supplies, particularly in light of drought conditions and in light of anticipated increase in growth of our population throughout the planning horizon of the document. Importantly, it's also used to support Senate Bill 610 required water supply assessments for large developments, and it provides the basis of unitized demands for infrastructure planning. What does that mean? Essentially, when we size new infrastructure, such as pipelines, the unit demand per connection that's attributed for each connection is often sourced from an urban water management plan. So diving into the supply data, what you're looking at here is our normal year supply. I would like to note here that compared to the workshop, we've made 0 changes to this slide, as well as compared to the 2020 Urban Water Management Plan, there are 0 changes. You can see some of the district's more commonly known supply rights and entitlements, such as Sly Park Reservoir, Project 184, Permit 2112. And then I'll note the planned supply of the CVP Fazio water is projected to come online in 2035. So in a normal year, the district's current subtotal of existing supplies, just under 71,000 acre-feet available. So we're going to skip over the second scenario, which is the single dry year scenario that we looked at in the workshop, and instead now look at the multiple dry year supply scenario, which is the most challenging scenario that the district may face. I'll call out that the boxes highlighted in orange there represent an anticipated decrease compared to the prior scenario, which would be the single dry year scenario. You can see that in a year 5 of a drought, we are projected to have just over 54,000 acre-feet of available supply currently. Compared to the 2020 plan, district staff decided to make updates to the ditches/Weber Reservoir rights in light of updated hydraulic analysis based on the 2021 dry year. So that took the ditches/Weber Reservoir rights from 3,000 acre-feet per year down to 2,500 and then 2,250 in years 3 through 5. So in year 5 of a multi-dry year supply, we're looking at just over 54,000 acre-feet of available supply currently.
That means not including Fazio.
Correct. Yeah. Just reflecting our current supply on that subtotal existing supplies line.
Can I ask one question? Or not a question, just make a comment and correct me if I'm wrong. At the general ratepayer watching this, they would want to know, how does that impact us? Does, if I remember rightly, an average user, a water user, a ratepayer, or whatever, resident, uses about one half of an acre foot? Per
Yeah, so I
year.
don't have it in acre-feet per year off the top of my head, but we do have the unit demands in future slides here. I can
Okay,
skip
Okay.
ahead.
that's right.
0.4, yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
so 0.4, depending
It's a
upon the
half of it,
service area.
Yeah, half,
Yeah.
right.
It-
Okay.
And it's declining.
It's interesting how El Dorado Hills uses the most.
Well, because of larger lots and more landscaping, it
Okay.
is more typical. And thank you, Maria, you're good at.
Thank you.
My mic turning on or no? But yeah, but it's actually declining throughout, and I know, I'm sure you see this. Combination of the new building is, our much more water efficient, new homes. And because of the two droughts that we had recently, a lot of people have gone to more xeriscaping, have eliminated lawns, for instance. We used to have 3 small lawns, we have no lawn now. That's quite common now, more and more in El Dorado Hills. Not in some of the ritzy places, but in the more common people areas that I live in.
Yeah, around my neighborhood too.
People are more cognizant of that and have been conserving water.
Gardens. Okay, thank you.
Okay. So that was a look at our supply, and now we're going to jump and look at kind of what we're projecting into the future to 2050. So starting with the table on the bottom there, that is our population served by the district. Currently, we serve just over 128,000 persons served, and projected to serve just over 162,000 by 2050. Correspondingly, our total water service connections are just under 44,000 across the district, and we're projected to be about 55,480 by 2050. So getting back to this unit demand factor that we just kind of previewed. So looking at the unit demand factors, which represent an acre feet per year per connection, so it's per connection that's represented here. We've got them separated by existing customer and new customers, as well as our 3 service regions, El Dorado Hills, Western, and Eastern, and then classified by customer type. As we just had a discussion about, we see and are projected to see a drop in demand for new customers. For the single-family residential category, that represents a 15% reduction. That estimation is made based off of things that we discussed, like the Model Water Efficient Landscape Ordinance, which really requires turf reductions and things like that, as well as the California Green Code, which looks at low-flow fixtures and requires some of those. The county, El Dorado County, is the enforcing agency for new development and make sure that those standards are included. And then at the bottom there, I've got some equivalent notes from acre feet per year to gallons per day, which may be helpful for some. So we looked at the projected increase in population and connections. We just looked at the unit connection, or the unit demand factor, excuse me. Rolling that all up into the future demands projected through 2050 is what's shown in this table here. We can see the total potable demand by 2050 is projected at 40,960 acre feet per year. And some of the takeaways here should not be surprising, but we do anticipate very fast and solid growth both in the El Dorado Hills and Western region, that kind of Cameron Park area. There is still some anticipated growth in the Eastern region, but that is primarily reflected in the agriculture row under the other category of this table. So the urban water management plan looks across 3 scenarios: a normal year, a single dry year, and 5 consecutive dry years. We are now looking at the supply reliability section, and we've skipped over the normal and single dry years, and instead are going to look at just that 5 consecutive dry year scenario. You may recall from the workshop, the district is projected to have a surplus of over 9,000 available acre feet per year in year 5 of a drought, all the way out in 2050. So that's good news. A couple things I'll point out here. This does not account for regulatory curtailments as potential the state may enact. It also does not consider infrastructure limitations. Those are primarily accounted for in the district's master plan, as well as potentially project-specific engineering analysis that will be done for new developments. It does, however, represent unconstrained demand, meaning slight increases above normal. We can see that, for example, in 2030, if we look at year 1 demand of 40,450 acre feet per year, and then bump down to year 2, we see that increase to 40,940 acre feet per year. That's a 5% increase. That's intentional. It's intended to be conservative and to reflect a potential increase primarily in outdoor watering as we progress through a dry period. So in that sense, it's conservative to ensure that that surplus we arrive at in year 5 in 2050 at 9,000 plus acre feet per year is accurate.
If I could make an editorial comment of, you talked about regulatory curtailment. In the droughts, the previous droughts, the board, we were discussing, we felt that we could ask people to conserve about 5%, and because our goal was to make sure we had enough carryover at Sly Park to continue to handle the dry conditions. And we felt with 5% conservation, we would easily be able to do that. However, the state had different ideas. And at the time, I think we ended up with an 18% mandatory conservation that we, the district, had to do. I think it started out at 25%, and we were able to argue it down to I wouldn't call it a reasonable 18%, because that's tough. One of my concerns going forward in the future, as I alluded to before, is people have already done a lot to conserve inside and outside their homes. And I don't think we would have nearly as much wiggle room as we did back then. I mean, and we see the per use. When I started here, the average dwelling unit use was around 3/4 of an acre foot in El Dorado Hills, and over half an acre foot up the hill, and both have dramatically gone down. So that's good. People are being conservation minded, but I just worry at the next drought, and then we will have another long drought. If the state puts mandates on us, it's going to be harder for us to achieve. Just a concern.
Yeah. Thank you. So touching on public outreach, in the workshop, we talked about some of the things that we had done and that we were going to do for public outreach. Now that we're here today for the public hearing, I'm going to recap those actions again. So notices were sent via email and the post to relevant agencies in mid-March. Those agencies are cities and counties that we work with, as well as regional entities such as the Water Authority, the Water Forum, and the Regional Water Authority and LAFCO. The draft plan has been posted on eid.org since late April, and then notice of today's public hearing has been posted in the Mountain Democrat for 2 consecutive weeks to satisfy the requirements of the Urban Water Management Planning Act. So key takeaways and next steps. As we saw in a few of the slides, our supplies well exceed demands all the way through 2050, and we do anticipate that our supply portfolio will be made stronger by the addition of the planned supply. As we've talked about as well, the unit demands continue to trend downward over time, and we've revised population estimates and included an updated analysis of anticipated developments into this plan, and yet the conclusion of sufficient water supply remains true, which is good for the district. Upon today's hopeful adoption, this will be filed with the Department of Water Resources by the July 1 deadline. Your board options are presented there, and staff is recommending option 1 to adopt resolution adopting the 2025 Urban Water Management Plan and
Move
Water
option
Shortage
1.
Contingency Plan. Thank you.
I'll second.
Okay. It has been moved by Director Day and seconded by Director Dwyer, approval of this. So we'll take it to the public.
We will now open public comment on this item. If you're present in the boardroom and wish to speak, please come to the microphone and state your name for the record. Virtual participants may refer to the instructions provided on the first page of today's agenda. President Anzini, does not appear that any member of the public is wishing to comment. Would you like me to call for the vote?
Yes, please.
Great. We have a motion to adopt a resolution adopting the 2025 Urban Water Management Plan and Water Shortage Contingency Plan, moved by Director Day and seconded by Director Dwyer. We are ready for the vote.
Okay, board members?
Okay, and motion passes.
Okay. We'll move on to item number 8, finance, public hearing on our finances. Take it away, Penny.
Madam President,
Yes.
if I may.
Yes. Before we do the report,
Yeah.
Director Day would like to speak.
I would like to make a motion to continue item 8, and I'll explain why, and why I'm doing it now at the beginning versus the end. And now I have to take my glasses off in order to be able to read. So first I want to compliment our GM and Penny and the finance staff with all the progress that you guys have made in a very short time, and I'm very supportive of it. I think you're doing a lot of good things. For item 8, however, I'm concerned that we've had no prior board discussions of what could be a very significant long-term commitment in both policy and dollars, namely the large number of reserve accounts and potentially doubling or even tripling reserves. As presented, this could be a $2.5 million unfunded mandate, if you will, because we'd be creating policy but no way to fund it right now. And while I'm supportive of increasing our reserves, and it sounds good, it's at the cost of what? Of delayed capital improvement projects, delayed repairs, further rate increases on top of existing double-digit rate increases? We don't know. The grand jury chastised us, the board, for rubber stamping proposals with insufficient financial information and without full understanding of the financial context and impacts. I, for one, do not understand the full ramifications of these proposed changes. We have insufficient context as to how this plays into the cost of service study and rates. Some, for instances, of things I'm troubled by, are there more simplified ways for us to achieve some of these goals? The American Water Works Association Cash Reserve Policy Guidelines recommends 3 reserve accounts: operating, capital, and debt service. This proposes 7 disparate reserve funds, which creates more complexity and less flexibility. Also, how will the proposed pension and OPEB reserves relate to our ongoing payments made to CalPERS and our outstanding pension obligation bonds? This should be a standalone information item, I think, so that we can look at the full pension and OPEB picture at one time. In the packet, it's made clear that there's no immediate financial impact, though long-term, it could be significant, $2.5 million plus a year for 15 years. And I understand that some of these reserves are aspirational, both of which, the no immediate impact and aspirational versus practical, actually supports the case for continuing this item. We have time and should take our time. How could and how will these policy and reserve proposals impact the cost of service study? How will they impact our PAYGO repair projects, our CIP project, and most particularly rates? Therefore, I move that we continue item 8 until at least August 24th or later, to be presented as an information item, or preferably multiple information items, for discussion, concurrent with and in context with the cost of service study workshops and discussions. Thank you.
President Anasini, before there is a second, might I suggest that if I'm understanding Director Day's motion, that you would delay the vote on the continuance until after the presentation is given, so that you have the information, but no action is taken until such time as whatever time you'd like to continue it to.
I'm comfortable either way. I think it's, to me, I mean, whether Penny does her presentation and then we vote on this, or I'm comfortable with that if that's the board's preference. We could do it now. It depends on what the board prefers. The key core of what I'm getting at is I think all of this should be discussed at the same time we're going through the cost of service study workshop. And so we know how these potential reserves, potentially $2.5 million a year or more for 15 years, will impact rates and projects and such. We shouldn't be doing it in isolation or burdening this board and future boards with an unfunded mandate, so to speak, until we know more. So, but
So it sounds like, Director Day, that you're willing to listen to the
Sure.
presentation, and then we can decide from there. But I appreciate you bringing this
Okay.
up.
Yeah,
So how about the rest of the board?
okay.
All right. Go ahead.
Okay. Good morning, President Anzini, members of the board. It's not. Oh, My name's Penny Buckman. I'm the district's finance director. We're here to discuss the proposed amendments to board policies 30, 10, 20, and 50 related to budget, revisions to the budget, and financial conditions and activities. Previous board actions include on September 11th, 2006, the board adopted the Series 3000 District Business Operations Policies. That included the budgets, the revision to the budget, and the financial conditions and activities. On May 23rd, 2016, the board also adopted proposed amendments to Board Policy 3010. The summary issue includes that board approval is required to amend board policies. These policies were originally adopted in 2006 with minimal changes, and a comprehensive review identified opportunities to modernize and consolidate district policies that align with the Government Finance Officers Association best practices. The change, as we are going through the review today, the board agenda package includes a red line version of these policy changes as well as a clean version for the public review. Updates include the district's financial management language. We've added 5 sections: financial management, budget adoption, debt service, budget revisions, and financial conditions and activities. It also changes the 2-year budget adoption to adopting an annual budget and CIP with a 5-year financial plan. It clarifies the debt service at 1.25 times the minimum coverage ratio, excluding FCCs and water transfers. And then it includes board policy 3020 and 3050 into the one budget policy, and it will also eliminate administrative regulation 3051 for budget principles. As part of the budget principles, we wanted to put them into the policy for board approval. These are the principles that we're recommending. The budget shall be structurally balanced, reoccurring revenues, fund reoccurring expenses. Rates and fees shall be set at levels sufficient to recover the full cost of providing service, including operations, maintenance, debt service, and capital reinvestment. The district shall maintain reserves at a board minimum level to protect against revenue shortfalls, emergencies, and infrastructure needs. Reserves and unappropriated fund balances shall not be drawn down without board approval and a plan for replenishment. Debt shall be only used for capital projects with repayment terms that do not exceed the useful life of the financed asset. And the annual budget shall be informed by a long-range financial plan and linked to the district's capital improvement plan. Rate revenues from each enterprise system shall be used only for the cost of that system. Public funds shall be expended in compliance with applicable law and sound procurement practices that prevents conflicts of interest and ensures competitive purchasing. And financial performance will be monitored throughout the year with material variances being reported to the board. And government-required filings and debt service payments shall be made accurately and on time. Staff is also recommending that the designated reserve policy replace board policy 3020 revisions to the budget. It will eliminate the need for the administrative regulation for the reserves, effectively elevating the reserve policy to the board level, which gives the board complete oversight of the reserves and how they will be managed. It also establishes a formal framework for the reserves that aligns with GFOA best practices and as recommended by the district's municipal advisor. The policy includes defining minimum, target, and maximum levels for each reserve type. It authorizes staff to use the reserves in accordance with adopted budgets and declared emergencies. It requires an annual reserve analysis to be presented to the board with the budget, and it mandates formal policy review at least every 3 years in conjunction with our district municipal advisor and bond counsel. Operating capital and emergency reserves are aligned with GFOA best practices. And then restricted reserves will always follow legal mandates. So these are the reserves, how the use and the replenishment plan for each one. I do want to just note quickly with some of the comments that were made, we actually are taking away the capital replacement reserve for equipment and combining it with the capital replacement and replacing that one with the emergency reserve. So the 4 reserves are actually still the same number of reserves that we had previously. The operating reserve is intended to be used when there is an unexpected decline in revenues or total revenue loss, and will be replenished within 1 year whenever it falls below the minimum. The capital reserve will be used to fund capital projects, including replacements. The district will also try to replenish this reserve within 1 year. Any projects that cannot be funded from debt proceeds or available fund balance will be deferred until the minimum is reached. The emergency reserve will be used for damages caused by natural disasters or a declared state or local federal emergency. Proceeds from FEMA and the district's insurance will be returned to this reserve, so we're not funding it with ratepayer funding. As it's used, it'll get reimbursed by outside funding. The insurance reserve will be used to pay insurance deductibles as applicable, and the target will be replenished with insurance reimbursements as well until the target can be reached. Facility capacity fees are collected from developers connecting to the wastewater and water systems. Proceeds are held in a restricted fund, separate for capital expenditures. Since these fees are not collected, there are no minimum target or maximum for the fund. And we put it on here as a reserve because it is technically a reserve for capital, but ratepayer funding does not go into that reserve. Pension will be a trust, and OPEB is already in a trust that will go into more detail on a future slide. But they will never fall below the minimum target. Okay, these are the designated reserves with the targets. Operating has a desired target of 180 days of cash on hand with a minimum of 90. There is no maximum. The available fund balance is included in the calculation for year-end reporting and will often be reported higher than the 180 days. The capital reserve has a target of the next year's expected capital expenditures plus 50% of the following year's expected capital expenditures with any contingency. The maximum for this reserve will be 5 years of capital expenditures. The emergency reserve will have a minimum of 1 month and a target and maximum of 3 months of operating expenses. And an analysis has shown that this is in line with prior disasters such as Caldor Fire. As previously discussed, the FCC does not have any targets since they are fees that are dependent on development. The pension reserve is being recommended at 94% minimum, which is where the district is currently, and 100% as the target. This is the amount of the overall pension the district owes, not just the unfunded liability, and I'll go into more detail on that soon. OPEB is currently funded at 30%, and the target is 75%. OPEB is different than pension in that it is based on assumptions and not actuals. So we will also discuss that soon. These are what our balances would be if we were funding them currently. The chart represents the calculated reserves for the 2026 approved budget and the 26 to 30 financial plan. The target operating reserve is calculated at $37.8 million and is currently at $25.6 million, which is above the minimum. The capital reserve target is $14.3 million with a current balance of $11.1 million, which is also above the minimum. The emergency reserve is new and does not have a current balance, but the target is calculated at $19.2 million, and the insurance reserve is fully funded at $1 million. The total unrestricted reserves have a current balance of $37.7 million, which exceeds the minimum of $35.5. To meet the target, the district needs to deposit $34.6 million into reserves. If the policy is approved by the board today, the needs will be included in the cost of service currently being developed. For the pension and OPEB, the outstanding unfunded liability for pension is the amount of the target minus the minimum, which is $14.7 million currently. And OPEB has a target of $44.7 million.
Can you leave that chart up? Oh,
Yep,
sorry,
can
go
go
back to that chart. And Director Day, that then is really the essence of your concern, isn't it? Where the question, I think, is where are we going to get the funds to go from our current balance
To target.
the target?
Right.
What's the answer? Where are we going to get those funds?
Well, it'll be through budget savings, Obviously, future rate increases will have to be built into the cost of service, but it's going to take time. It's not going to happen overnight. It will not happen tomorrow.
Right, and to that point is, I think we should, and why I'm proposing that we continue this and continue to discuss it, is how will that impact rates? To what degree? How will that impact, what project will we not be able to do because we do that? But that, I mean, there's always opportunity costs, and I think before we put this in stone, I think we should discuss all those things concurrent with the cost of service study.
And Penny, maybe you have, along those same lines, you know, there's strategies we could pursue that would minimize the impact on our ratepayers or mitigate, instead of trying to jump to this in 1 year, as you said, it would be a phased approach over many years. So I think we need to see what that's going to look like.
Well, they have it in here, it's 15 years is the target, I believe.
Well, that's for pension and OPEB, and pension and OPEB, I'll get there in a minute, but the total cost for us to fund the pension and OPEB is actually only $193,000 going forward for the next 15 years. I'm not sure where the $2.5 million is coming from.
That's, I took the 15 years and that, to get $37 million more.
Oh.
To get to the target.
Yeah.
It'd be $2.5 million a year over 15 years. That's just, it could be 20.
Yeah.
It could be 10. If it's 10, it's gonna be a 3 or 4 million a year. If it's, you know, do we do $1 million a year? This is what I think, I'm uncomfortable putting these policies in place today without us knowing how it's gonna impact all of our projects and our rates and all that sort of stuff. It all goes together. And that's kind of what the grand jury criticized us before doing, of just putting the cart before the horse and just moving on and stamping stuff and not understanding the context in relation to everything else.
I do want to make clear, though, we already have a reserve policy in place that is not too far off from this if we were to meet it today. This is just establishing a new policy so that when we go into the cost of service, we know what to include in the cost of service. So do we include and that can be the direction that we're given if we include the old reserve policy or the proposed policy, so.
And then that also goes to my point of further education and discussion of maybe the current policy versus this proposed new policy, because we only got this on Thursday. And so I think all of this is big picture, significant stuff that deserves more time and more discussion.
Okay.
So the pension and OPEB reserves are not traditional reserves. They're held by the district. Instead, they are going to be proposed as trusts with CalPERS. The pension trust would be established over the next 2 years is what I'm recommending. Staff would establish it through budget savings or one-time revenues, and then also recommending 100% funding status per the board's direction after the issuance of the 2022 bonds. Currently, the district's pension is funded at 94% with unfunded accrued liability balance of $14.7 million. And then OPEB trust has been in place since 2012 and is currently funded at 30%. The overall target is set to 75%. Unlike pension, OPEB is based on estimates and includes a rate subsidy for retirees that inflates the amount of OPEB for the unfunded accrued liability. So in talking with our actuary consultant, they agree that 75% is sufficient for the district to be at. To fund the trust sooner than the estimated 15 years at the current funding strategy, staff recommends board approval to utilize one-time savings and one-time revenues whenever the general manager determines it to be feasible. And then once the trusts are at the target funding amount, the district can then reimburse itself the annual payments that we're paying to PERS, which just off the top of my head, I think is about $2.5 million a year. And then, of course, that would be making sure we don't go below the funding strategy amount, the 75 and the 100%. So these amortization schedules come from CalPERS. The 18 years in the first column is what we're currently paying on. And it normally would be a 25-year schedule, but because we paid it off in 2022, we're on 18 years. And then they also provide a 15 and 10-year for paying off the unfunded accrued liability. Based on affordability and long-term balance, staff recommends aligning with the 15-year schedule. The cost for the 2026 and 2027 budget years would be about $178,895. And we would recommend going ahead and paying that in 2027 as a one-time expense. And then ongoing costs in 2029 for 15 years would be $193,691 a year. Over 15 years, but every time we put one-time budget or one-time revenues in there, that would decrease that as well. For OPEB, staff completed an analysis that included several assumptions, remaining with CalPERS Strategy 1 for the trust, which is the highest annual rate of return for options 2 and 3. For option 1, the strategy assumes moving to strategy 2 in 2032 to lower the risk on losses. It would go from 7.5% net return to 6%. And then payments could begin in 2029 if the district wanted to speed things up and go with option 1 or 2. And then it also includes 3% inflation on benefit costs. And then staff is recommending option number 3. Now, it does show that we could withdraw $690,000 in 2027, but we're not recommending that we do that. It just simply reflects with reinvestment only that we can meet our funding strategy in 15 years without putting any additional funding into OPEB. And then as previously discussed, once the trusts meet the required funding level, we would then be able to reimburse ourselves, and it would also support pension and OPEB costs long-term. And there are no funding requirements today, and adoption of updated policies will support the district's long-term financial stability by formalizing the framework for the budget management and reserve levels across the water and wastewater systems. At this time, the district is meeting the reserve minimums and will strive to reach the targets over time through the cost of service currently being developed. And there will be a budget request included in 2027 to support the one-time payments to CalPERS for pension, and in 2029 for the $193,694 going forward. And the board options are presented for you. So
Now, if I may, so I'm not arguing against any of this, and I may end up fully supporting all of it. But I don't know, and I don't feel like I know enough, and I don't know how, the context of how, do we fund our reserves $1 million a year? That would take 35 plus years, not counting inflation, to get to our target. Do we do it in 15? That's 2.5. All these have impacts on our spending, on our rates, and I want us to discuss them concurrent with those discussions before we set a policy in stone. So again, would you like me to reiterate my motion and see if we get a second? So therefore, I move that we continue item 8 until at least August 24th or later, to be presented as an information item for discussion, preferably multiple information items, concurrent with and in context with the cost of service study workshops and discussions.
Okay, any board members want to second it?
Well, first, I'm curious if Pravani has any comments before we entertain a second. Additionally, I'm also curious if we do delay action as Director Day is asking for, what does that do to the timeline of the current cost of service study? What are the impacts there?
So I'm going to do an update later on this morning on the cost of service study and the timeline we're looking at. I do have concern with delaying this decision until August, because the challenge is we need to be able to factor in board policies to the cost of service. And I appreciate your concern about what that impact is going to be. So I think what we may be able to do is, in analyzing these, is provide the board with indication. So we're already meeting the minimums. If we need to meet the target, what does that look like in that timeline, and how many years out are we forecasting that? I will emphasize that these policies, especially since we're going to be setting minimums versus targets and maximum, and we're not recommending maximums, we're merely recommending meeting targets. The board always has the ability in any given fiscal year to decide not to meet the target if we're still funding towards target. These policies overall is trying to get the district in the long term to be more financially stable than we currently are. We have emergencies that are popping up at us on a continuous basis. And there's no way for us to tell whether we're going to have enough revenue at any given time to meet those emergencies.
Again, I'm not arguing against
No,
building reserves, because we're going
Right.
off topic right now.
Right, so all we're asking is if we can get the board to approve what they think is reasonable targets for these reserves, we can factor that into our long-term plans and give indication of what that's gonna look like. Now, we can factor it into the long-term plans, but when we actually come to the board and we say, okay, here's with everything we factored in, we're looking at these rate adjustments over whatever timeline. At that point, absolutely, the board can say, okay, no, we're gonna pull these back because it's pushing up too much, take that out, see what that's gonna come back with, or we can present it as, here's the alternative that includes what we're building up to in terms of reserves. Here's the alternative that excludes it and just maintains the minimum. For your evaluation and decision as to which way we go. Timeline, I'm worried if we wait until August, it is going to be too late to appropriately factor in whatever the board's decision is to the cost of service.
I don't understand that, because it's going to impact our spending and our rates, and it should be discussed concurrent with those discussions. I don't understand how, I think it's a false sense of urgency that it has to be done today, because basically it's putting the cart before the horse. So we're baking the pie, or that's a bad analogy, but anyhow, we're setting these targets without knowing how it's going to impact things. Now, if this had included discussing, more information about how this, hey, if we did $1 million a year in reserves, or we do 2.5, or we do $5 million a year, this is what it would take in rates, or this is how it would take, we take it out of property taxes, but then, of course, that ultimately affects rates. We don't know that. So I'm just really uncomfortable not knowing how this is going to impact things. And I think I picked August simply because that's when you said you were going, in the next item or whatever, that's when we were going to be doing workshops. So I thought that's not very far away, 6 weeks. I thought it'd be very reasonable to discuss it at the same time. That's why I picked August.
I think what we should consider is this, and perhaps the board, if you feel strongly that that decision shouldn't be made, and it doesn't have to be today, we could come back to the next meeting if there's more information that you want to see to be able to make a good decision. I'm okay with that. I'm just saying that all the way to August is a little challenging, but I will propose this as a means of trying to understand what you're looking for and where we're at. Could we get an indication from the board whether the proposed policies are reasonable in terms of achieving a more financially stable district? And if we have that as an indication, it can be factored in and presented in terms of impact at the time that we go through the workshops on the cost of service. Because I think what we're asking for is direction on what we should be planning for. And right now, we have currently existing reserve policies. We're just trying to plan and create something that is a little more stable. Do we have general indication from the board that that is reasonable? Because if that is, then we can factor it in and present to you so you can see what that looks like. And then at that time, when we're deciding on the cost of service, you can give us indication, yeah, we think the way this is factored in and the impact to the rates is reasonable, and we do then want to approve the policy. I think I'm trying to figure out what our direction's gonna be.
Well, you had mentioned, I'm comfortable if we just continue this to the next meeting, if you want to come back and flesh it out and give a little more detail on the pension and OPEB. I know that's not a big dollar amount, but I'd like to see it context with our other obligations in that realm. And then most significantly is how would we fund this target? How would we reach it? Why create a target if we have no ability to reach it? So I would like to see, and I'm comfortable amending my motion and continuing it just to the next meeting, if we can discuss, and have more detail and more information of how would we achieve those targets and what would the impact of working towards those targets be on our rates and/or our spending on our projects. Are you comfortable with coming back at next meeting and trying to flesh it out and answer some of those questions?
We can do that. I don't know if we can do the 22nd. I have that coming on the 22nd as well.
Can I just interact here a little bit? What I see Director Day's question is, we're looking at a phased, you have identified that several times. It's kind of a transparent sheet on top of each item that's coming to us that will end before the end of this year, which is a cost of services. But it also is imperative that we address, and you're certainly doing that, addressing the concerns that were brought up in the grand jury from last year. And it all had to do with the financial reporting and how it wasn't stable enough or wasn't viewed as adjustments. You've made a lot of adjustments. So I see this one thing, that you're asking us to cement this administrative regulation, which hasn't been changed since 2006 and certainly needs to be updated. But again, to make these items work in tandem is going to have to take a little bit more time for us to digest. And so I appreciate the fact, and I understand what Director Day's concerns are. I think most of the board does on where we want to be, but it all will have to do at the very end of this year. And to cement this into a foundation that might not be changeable when we get to those other questions, it makes it hard. So I just want to suggest that what Director Day is asking is just put this off till the next meeting, give us more information. What I'd like to see is Director Day give the questions that really need to be answered to staff on how is this going to happen. But we don't know until let's bring back our budget and let's look at that budget, because this was like, we approved the budget midterm, but we want to look at that, okay, what will happen today? Granted, we are just meeting the minimum reserves, and I understand the importance of bringing that up, really is important. We are the ratepayers, blessing here, and they want us to monitor this money so that their increased rates are not going to be just because we don't meet the reserves. However, I understand what Director Day is asking. I would highly suggest that if each board member has a question that would impact or make a difference, it gives you something to also work with. And it's not a surprise. Generally, when we receive an opportunity for a public hearing, we usually get an information item on this before. And maybe that's what this is all about. We didn't receive that information. I would like to see this as, today, this is an information item, and yes, we'll come back next month or next meeting and tell you a little bit more. But bring forward how that's going to impact what's coming down the slate. And that's the only way I see it. So do you want to modify Director Day?
First, some feedback from Penny. You were mentioning dates. What would be workable for you guys?
Right, so Penny's thinking, getting the data that you need to indicate what that longer-term impact is going to be. We can get it in July.
Okay.
And so we'll work, if we have anything available by the next meeting, we'll bring that and then follow up with the July meeting if there's additional information. But that will allow you enough time to be able to evaluate and ask questions as appropriate. So no, we don't have to make the decision today, but work towards the near term, evaluating and understanding what the board direction is.
So I'll amend my motion to continue this item to next meeting or later, so whatever it works out for you guys to put it together. And I think I'll just keep it simple as that, and then we can give board direction as to what information, more information we're looking at. Is that
Perfect.
reasonable?
Okay.
So I guess,
Is there a second?
Yeah, I'll second that, with some additional understanding maybe. As we build the cost of service study, there's certain elements that go into that study. And we've gone through several of those and had board review and approval. And all of them have a specific dollar amount. The capital improvement plan is a dollar amount. The operating budget is a dollar amount. We don't really have a dollar amount to put in for the change in our reserve policy. So I think if we could answer that question, it might ease some of the concern, saying, okay, what is the dollar? If we change this policy, what is going to be the impact on our budget and our rates? And that's, if you can answer that question, I think we can move forward.
Well, that question's going to get answered, though, through the cost of service analysis. I'm not going to answer that at the next meeting. It's going to have to get built into the models, so. And really, I guess what I'm going to ask for is direction from you on how long do you want us to take to fund the reserves? The reserves aren't being met currently, and they're really not that much higher than what our current policy is. So that's where we need from all of you is when do you want to meet the reserves?
well, maybe,
Because
and
that's what we need.
to go with what Pat's saying and what I've been saying is maybe at next meeting or in July, whatever works for you guys, then we have a discussion to determine some targets, to determine, I'm having a hard time with that word, but to set maybe some boundaries or targets, whether it's $1 million a year, $500,000 a year, $5 million a year. So let's have that discussion. And then we have a hard target that we can, then you have something to plug in, but we also then have something hard that we know and understand and can generally, we've been here a while, can know that what $2 million a year taken out of our budget or whatever is, is that a tank recoating? Is that our pipe repair program that we'd like to do? There's real world consequences, and I think we should discuss it. So, but I think let's do that when it works for you guys. And so again, I'll reiterate, I'll continue this to next meeting or later, into July, what works for you guys. And I think now, are we comfortable with trying to understand, get more information?
So I think what we're going to do is, as some of our tables indicated, what the dollar difference is then figure out what do we think is a reasonable timeline to be able to achieve the target, and then show you that. And we can roughly estimate what that might look
This
like
is a
if it even factors on the radar of a percentage adjustment for rates.
Right.
Is at least give you that indication. It's not going to be absolute, but is a indication of what we're looking at. And then the board can decide if we recommend it we achieve target within 5 years and the board's like, yeah, no, that's too much. You need to do 10 or you need to do 15 or whatever that timeline is, then we adjust and that will be the timeline to achieve the target. So the policies are not written to indicate what that timeline is. It's merely indicating that we would like to achieve the target. And whatever that timeline is acceptable because that's the best we're going to do. So I think that's an important distinction, is it doesn't tie the board into building that up in a short time frame. We can have it be as long as we need it to be, but the ultimate goal is that somewhere in the future, we will be in a better financial position to be able to deal with whatever comes at us. And even that's not absolute, right? We could foreseeably have an emergency that is way bigger than any of us can imagine, and our reserves might not be enough to deal with it. So we're just trying to be as fiscally minded as we can so we can deal with it. But yeah, we can, those timelines for when we achieve that target can be determined, and it can be determined based on each category, right? Because each category has the delta is different for each of those. So what's reasonable for a particular category? The pension, we all know, is a ticking time bomb, right? It's something that, we're going to focus on infrastructure. We're going to focus on the things that matter to our customers and providing the services we need to provide. That's our number one priority, and I'm going to go through some of that as we talk through cost of service. But that allows us to make sure that we're not forgetting about it, that we know it's there, and we're trying to build towards having something in place to deal with that. So yes, I think if we can approach it that way, that makes the most sense in terms of the concerns you've articulated and hearing what everyone on the board has to say, is to try to give you the best indication we can without the absolute complete cost of service.
Right, and I'm comfortable with that. And again, I want us to have more discussions. And when we get to your update on the cost of service study, that's what you're doing, which I think is wonderful. So, so do I hear a second?
Yeah, there was a second.
Oh, that's right, Pat, sorry. I forgot.
So just to be clear, one thing, and this is just my opinion on this, is slide number 9 in your presentation is the perfect example of what every board member here can look at. And maybe what we need to do is you take that slide and, yeah, that's not the slide. Anyway, doesn't matter. But it's about the designated reserves and the estimates in the millions. That one, yes. And that kind of can feed the over the sheets of cost of services and all those things that are going to be impacting these. And I just want to remind, and perhaps I'll be corrected by our attorney, but board policies are most impactful on some of this. This is an administrative regulation that isn't it administrative?
We're recommending to move it to a board policy so the board has complete oversight of the reserves.
Okay, so currently, there is no board policy.
It's an administrative regulation at this point.
Right, so they.
If I could could I just
Sure.
add to that? Yeah, this maybe is a good point to remind not just the board, but also the public, because these terms kind of become a little bit difficult to understand. The board establishes its policy and policy direction for the district through its board policies. Those are adopted by the board of the directors. But the board has delegated authority to interpret and execute its board policies to the general manager through the development of administrative regulations. Currently, the district has a reserve policy with these reserves established. But it's within the district's administrative regulation. In other words, it's developed by the general manager and it's overseen by the general manager. The intent, one of the intents of today's item, was to elevate the reserve policy into the board policies so that it's the board that's setting the policy direction on reserves how to fund reserves, how much to fund reserves. So I just didn't want the intent of this item to get lost. That is part of the intent, was to elevate this reserve policy out of the administrative regulations and into the board policies.
Perfect. Thank you. We were lost in the mundane parts of it that are important to each one of us. So there is a motion on the floor.
And I would just like to confirm, Director Day, you'd like that to be an information item.
Pardon
An
me?
information item is what you'd like it to be coming forward.
Ideally for discussion, and then right after that, bring it back for a vote. Yeah.
Okay. All right, so we will now open public comment on this item. If you are present in the boardroom and wish to speak, please come to the microphone and state your name for the record. Virtual participants may refer to the instructions provided on the first page of today's agenda. President Anzini, does not appear that any member of the public is wishing to comment. Would you like me to call for the vote?
Yes.
Okay. We have a vote made by, a motion made by Director Day to continue item 8 to the next meeting or later as an informational item. It was first by Director Day, seconded by Director Dwyer. And we're ready for the vote.
Okay, board vote.
Motion passes.
Now we'll move on to item.
Madam President, I want to thank everybody for indulging me and for helping with this process. I appreciate it.
Good. Now we get to talk about cost of services.
Good morning, board members, members of the public. My name is Pravani Vandya. I'm the general manager for the district. I'm going to present today on an update to the cost of service analysis. Prior board actions that were taken included the most recent, which was undergoing a public workshop on March 3rd related to the cost of service analysis and that process. April 27th, the board received a progress report on our cost of service analysis. Summary of the issue is that Proposition 218 establishes requirements that the district must follow when adjusting water, wastewater, and recycled water rates. A comprehensive cost of service analysis is necessary to develop cost-based, equitable rates to support the district's growing needs. It must identify utility rates that recover but do not exceed the costs necessary to provide the services we provide according to Proposition 218. Some background. We issued a contract to Water Resources Economics for the cost of service analysis. And that workshop that we held in March was part of that contract to explain the process to the board and members of the public. We've been engaged in the discovery phase. So we've provided Water Resources Economics with initial data, and we've been working to identify operational and infrastructure needs as part of that. We've developed a 3-tier priority framework to evaluate our funding needs. And that framework is split into priority 1, which is critical, priority 2, highly important, priority 3 are best practices. On the following slides, I will explain each of these priorities and what they mean. Priority 1 covers the most crucial and vital projects and programs to the district's basic infrastructure, operational, and maintenance needs. It includes mandatory health and safety, implying that any impact from our infrastructure and services will impact public health and safety. Requirements that are included in law or regulations or district policy fall under this category. They also include any applicable consent decrees or irrevocable agreements that the district is in where we have no reprieve, it must be met. Priority 2 covers the district's core infrastructure needs, but has a lesser magnitude of impact. It is related to things that exceed useful life compared to priority 1 and that are not included in priority 1. It includes infrastructure reliability that we want to maintain by repairing or replacing our assets that have recently exceeded or will exceed useful life within the next 5-year period. It enables continued fiscal sustainability and operational continuity. We upsize infrastructure to meet increasing development demands. However, I must emphasize that this is not covered by ratepayer funding. It is covered by development facility capacity charges. This category meets future regulatory requirements that are not yet mandated, but allows us to ensure that we are planning towards meeting those requirements. And it supports completion of district and/or external agency projects as necessary. Priority 3 covers best practices and long-term strategies to optimize our operational and infrastructure systems, providing performance beyond regulatory compliance. Deferment typically increases risks and long-term district costs, so we try to factor those into this category where we can. It supports increased service levels for future district needs. It improves efficiency and generates quantifiable time and cost savings that hopefully decreases our ratepayer costs. It provides a community benefit by improving livability and addressing climate impacts. And it supports long-term resiliency and reliability to extend asset life.
Bonnie,
Yes.
where do you see the change in the reserve policy falling in these 3 categories?
It's going to be between 2 and 3. I think I can make arguments for it to be in 2, but it also necessarily to ensure that there is not a high level of impact to our ratepayers. It could be priority 3 in terms of helping us build in the long term towards a more financially stable reserve. So yeah, I see it in both of those, and I could definitely make arguments both ways.
Okay, thank you.
So a revised approach includes a number of factors that dictate why we've revised our approach. The first being a public information officer position has been vacant, and we've been trying to fill that. Operationally and with our infrastructure, there are various needs that complicate our ability to ensure that over the long term, the nearer term, I should say, the next 5 years, we're factoring everything in we can appropriately to make the best decisions in terms of rate adjustments that might be necessary. That it's allowed us to step back, take a look at what we're doing, and adjust as follows. So we need additional time to be able to engage, educate the board and the community in terms of what is in the cost of service analysis and how much of it falls into the different categories so the board can help us make some of the decisions we need to make. We need to reevaluate our current capital infrastructure plans and operational needs to ensure that we are factoring in the highest priority things into our decisions where appropriate. We need to develop a financial plan that considers our ratepayer impacts, including the cost of the El Dorado Hills Water Treatment Plant, which is a significant cost to our infrastructure needs over the next financial term. That project is forecasted to be along the lines of $240 million, which is significant. And will dictate that the district needs to evaluate the use of bonding. And in order to be able to bond, you need to ensure that you have revenues to be able to pay those back. We also need to ensure that we have sufficient time to develop a communications plan that will cover all of the cost of service information to share with our board and members of the public, giving everyone enough time from presentation to decision time to analyze and determine what the issues are and any other questions that there might be, so we can appropriately factor that into what we're presenting as the board's next steps. Our community outreach plan, we hope to engage in a communications contract, which will be brought to the board to finalize. We will, through the board and public engagement, engage in public meetings, which will include 4 board meetings dedicated to the cost of service analysis.
Pravani,
Yes.
may I? Could you flesh out the contract for communication services of what the hope for that is, ballpark, what we think it might cost, versus doing it in-house?
And so I can't give you more information at this point in time. The reason being, we've made an offer for the public information officer. And if we're able to bring the person that I hope to bring on board, they have experience, and I think we will need less support from a consultant. But they haven't yet accepted our offer. Actually, hope to hear today about that. Yes, and so because I don't know which way that's going to go, it's difficult to tell. If we don't, depending on who the public information officer is and what experience they bring to the table, if they have less experience, we might rely more on a consultant. So there's a lot of dependencies in terms of who that person is, the PIO position. So I don't have more information. If we engage, so I've done some initial research in terms of if we used a consultant's services fully, and I've done this through Water Resources Economics, we'd probably be looking at maybe around $50,000 contract to engage in all of this. But this is, a rough sort of ballpark. That's the best indication I can give at this time. So in terms of board and public engagement, we're looking at 4 board meetings dedicated to the cost of service, education, and policy direction. There'll be 2 regular board meetings. There'll be 2 off-site public workshops. And then there will be multiple community meetings to engage with our ratepayers through associations, organizations, neighborhoods, as much as we can to try to get as much information as we can out to the public. We will engage our communications channels, which will be social media through Facebook, Nextdoor, the district website, through our waterfront newsletter, and as well as emailing directly to people who subscribe to our emails, and then also using local print media as appropriate to try to engage in all avenues for communicating out what the plans are, where we're going, and information related to what is included in the cost of service.
I have a question on the off-site public workshops. What I envision would be an active board discussion and then inviting public engagement and discussion, comments. In past, prior to your arrival, sometimes we would do these quote-unquote public workshops, but they basically were just a slide presentation to the public with no board interaction at all. They weren't very user-friendly as far as the ratepayers were concerned. So I'm hoping it's more of the former and not the latter.
So the 2 off-site public workshops will include board members and, yes, opportunity for interaction between members of the public present at those and board members. So those are formal meetings that will be scheduled and recorded and all of that. So we meet all of the legal requirements. The community meetings that I'm anticipating will be myself, members of the communities, if board members want to show up, I think the only challenge is that how many board members show up to any one of those. So that would be the only consideration. So there would be a difference between the public workshop and the community meeting.
I understand that. What I'm getting at with the workshops, with the board participation is, I would hope that we're not just presenting a fait accompli, that a finished product to the public, that it's an actual board debate of policy that then the public can witness and participate in. That's what I'm hoping for.
Yeah, so that's the plan for the public workshops. I think it will be similar to the cost of service process public workshop that we had, which is there was input from board members as well as members of the public on things that they wanted to see or things that they wanted us to be aware of so that we weren't, not giving enough information to the public. So it will be very similar to that. And this is going to be a process, so we will take input and factor it in as appropriate to ensure that the final cost of service that is presented to the board to make the 218 determination on will be the final. There will be similarities in terms of what we present, but we will have to take input and decide what the final will be. So yes, that will be that process. But that is one of the reasons why this timeline is being changed to ensure that we have adequate time to do all of that.
Great, thank you.
All right. So the next milestone is going to be the August workshop. The workshop agenda topics will include the updated cost of service timeline, draft communications plan will be presented, summary of financial findings to that point, community and stakeholder outreach strategy to ensure that we're on the same page in terms of what we're doing. And then there will be some board policy questions that we will have to work through. That's low-income assistance program options for consideration, rate structure preferences, that's the tiered, flat versus inclining blocks, and then agricultural customer classification approach. This is an area where there often is a lot of questions. I've certainly heard a lot over time. We want to make sure that we're all on the same page in terms of what we're doing. And then other rate design priorities that the board and members of the community feel like we should consider. And then direction on balancing ratepayer impacts versus infrastructure investments. And so that is the end of this informational item. I am available with staff for any further questions or comments.
Yes. Director Dwyer.
With the extending the timeline for the cost of service study, does that mean that usually the cost of service study timeline is structured so the rate changes go into effect in January to match our fiscal year? Do you anticipate that there'll be a different schedule?
So the cost of service that we're talking about, the time frame is we're talking about 2029 forward. So we have plenty of time to meet that January 1, 2029 date for
Okay.
implementation.
Good answer. Thank you.
So yes, just to be clear, the current cost of service study and rate adjustments that were approved will remain in place and not be changed. We're not talking about making changes to those.
Thank you.
That was important.
No, that's significant to know. That's good.
Okay. Any other questions from the board?
I just want to say thank you, and I think it's great that we're extending the process and taking our time and doing, whether the public participates or not, we're going to give them lots of opportunity. I think that's important.
If I remember, and I remember one of the cost of service, the very first one I attended, and Director Dwyer did, It was a dog and pony show, that what we gave, but that's what was the acceptable public. The public accepted that kind of thing when there was a presentation by staff to inform them on why there was no interaction between, we would answer questions and thank you for coming. But it was also during COVID. And so, the very first one, I was there and one other person, but the rest were home. And the second time we had it was actually just online. So, it's a different case now, different management, and a different way of viewing things. So I look forward to this new process that you've established, and I really appreciate the detail that both you and finance, wink, wink, have worked in order to get this going appropriately, because the less questions public has, the more information that's out there for them, that's good. So, thank you.
And I would concur that I think active attempts at community engagement and feedback and just understanding what we're doing and why we're doing it is a benefit to both ourselves and the community. And so let's take our time, do it right. We're in no rush. But we need to make sure, based on the previous item, that we have enough to keep our organization going and then dealing with our infrastructure issues that everyone's well aware of. So, thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you. We will now move on to action. Public comment. Oh, yeah, of course.
All right.
I'm sorry.
No worries. We will now open public comment on this item. If you're present in the boardroom and wish to speak, please come to the microphone and state your name for the record. Virtual participants may refer to the instructions provided on the first page of today's agenda. President Anzini, does not appear that any member of the public is wishing to comment. We're ready to move on to action
Okay,
items.
we'll move on to action item number 10. Mr. Wilson, we look forward to your presentation.
Excellent. So good morning, Board. Patrick Wilson, Senior Civil Engineer, here today to present the Strolling Hills Pipeline Improvement Project. This is a construction contract change order for the Board's.
So are you bringing show and tell?
Not today.
Okay.
Not today. Sorry. We haven't started the project yet.
All right.
So previous board action, as the board's aware, the original design contract was awarded in February of 2024. And ultimately, some additional funding was approved in May of 2025. This project was included in the 2026 Capital Improvement Plan. And as the board's aware, back in January, we did approve contracts for Mazingo Construction for the actual construction of the project, ICM Group for project management, and Waterworks Engineers for the construction engineering services. And just as a reminder, they were not the original design engineer on record, which leads us to the summary of the issue. Waterworks did a complete deep dive within the design drawings and project specifications, and ultimately came up with some proposed alternatives that we worked with Mazingo Construction to provide a revised cost for. These design alternatives were a basis of extensive hydraulic modeling that was completed on the original alignment of the pipeline, both horizontally and vertically, if you will. And this subsequently led to a material change to high-density polyethylene, better known as HDPE, as opposed to the original PVC that was on the original bid documents. And I'll get into why that is further a little bit later, excuse me. So the project overview, the overall location of the pipeline in its physical state for the alignment will stay in the same location. It's the trench locations that's going to shift with this design change order, and I'll get into that. So the project itself will get from Duroc Road into Lariat Drive, and then will work its way down Strolling Hills Road and turn onto Flying Sea Road to ultimately tie into the gravity sewer shown in the bottom left-hand corner, which will make its way to Deer Creek Wastewater Treatment Plant. So as I mentioned, there's been changes to the scope of work that are being proposed. So with that hydraulic analysis, additional air release valve was identified. Just for the board's knowledge, a missing air release valve in this complexity of a pipeline of force main There is the potential, albeit it's extreme and extraordinary, for the pipeline to become airbound and effectively lose the ability to produce flow at the rates necessary during critical times of the year. So it's very important for, based on the hydraulic analysis, to add this air release valve. As I also mentioned, HDPE was ultimately selected. It's shown there on the right being fused together. That's a fusing machine showing two sections of HDPE being welded together. This offers an extraordinary flexibility, not just for installation, but long-term ownership of the pipeline itself. The main installation point that became challenging with PVC was effectively that PVC, we don't allow radial bends. We don't allow the pipe to be bent during installation. As you can see on the previous slide, there was a lot of bends down Sterling Hills Road, bends down Flying C. That ultimately required an extraordinary amount of fittings in order to actually implement and install that pipe. HDPE, we were able to minimize that because of its ability to bend on radius, allowing us to basically weave our way down the hillside and really provide a much better product for the district. Additionally, with HDPE, the pipeline itself, as shown on the right there, is actually welded together. So it's effectively a jointless pipe system outside of the handful of fittings that we'll need to make tie-ins and what have you. That's a significant benefit for the district long-term for ownership maintenance, as well as we are in close proximity to some drinking water lines, so it minimizes the potential impacts for any leaks in the future with respect to being in close proximity for contamination in the advent of a horrible disaster, you know, a failure, that kind of thing. It minimizes that as a potential option for the district long-term.
I'm curious, is it a heat weld? Is it a chemical weld? Heat
Yeah, it's a
weld.
heat weld.
Okay.
Yep. And so it's actually a logged heat weld that will utilize various different strata that are taking data points along the pipeline as it's being heated. All that gets documented, and we'll retain that long-term. So if there's ever a failure or any sort of issue between us and the manufacturer, we'll have all that data to be able to provide. That's a very extreme case to have that as a failure point. There's preparation that goes into it. There's cleaning, what have you. All that will be followed. We have a detailed specification that was developed by Waterworks that's been provided to Ms. Engel, that's included in their proposal to follow those rules. Yeah. So with that change to HDPE, we had originally had 20-inch PVC that was designed for. However, HDPE has a different defined diameter over, a DR, diameter ratio. So that's effectively the nominal thickness of the pipe over the outside diameter. It's a ratio, it's unitless. So PVC has one of DR14 that we originally designed to. HDPE is DR9. It's kind of like wire sizing, if you will. Because of its additional thickness, that shrunk the inside diameter of the pipeline if we maintained a 20-inch. Therefore, we needed to increase the outside diameter size to 24-inch to allow for the same effectively nominal inside diameter flow rate. So there's no change in the actual pipeline capacity standpoint. It's actually maintaining relatively the same internal diameter that it had before. However, we needed to increase the external diameter, and that led to some, obviously, to be transparent, challenges with costing, right? So that increased the overall excavation by about 10%, obviously going up in size. It also increased the trench restoration by way of asphalt. And then finally, Waterworks did a very detailed review of the bid items themselves and discovered that there was a lack of available square footage from the grind and overlay of the asphalt restoration. So we do the trench section first when they install the pipe, and then ultimately when we leave, we'll grind the width, half the width of the roadway. That quantity was approximately half of where it needed to be, so that was also included in this proposal to revise that number to include the additional square footage. So we also have to tie this HDPE into PVC on both sides, and so that actually requires some very specific couplings that are designed to transition between the two pipe materials. And it also requires a cutoff wall or a head wall, whatever you'd like to call it, that'll effectively restrain that. It's concrete, and it's poured around the HDPE pipe, and it keeps it in place between the expansion, because PVC and HDPE don't expand at the same rates. And so that's all included in this proposal. As I mentioned, there was a reduction in fittings, so we went from 49 fittings down to 7. which is a significant improvement for the long-term operation of the pipeline. As I show there on the right, it can kind of weave down paths very easily. We also were able to remove a blow-off based on the alignment changes. So I had mentioned initially that we looked at both horizontal, where the trench will end up within the roadway. We also looked at the vertical slope, and we improved some of that vertical slope, which allowed us to remove one of the blow-offs as well. And we also removed one vehicle turnout alongside of that. Those are required for air release valves, and we were able to adjust the placement of an air release valve to remove that from the contract. So Mozingo provided a proposal based on all those changes, and the district, along with ICM, our construction management group, reviewed it and feel that the cost proposal is within line of where we expect. So just a reminder, the approved 2026 CIP plan included $13.5 million. The initial construction funding that was approved with the initial contracts was a little over $9.1 million, which left an approved 2026 CIP balance of about $4.3 million. Mozingo's contract change order, proposal number 1, is $608,696.40, which would leave an approved 2026 CIP balance of a little over $3.7 million. So staff is recommending option 1, which is award a contract change order to Mozingo Construction, Inc. in the not-to-exceed amount of $608,696.40 for additional excavation, pipe diameter increase, additional appurtenances, and pavement restoration for the Sterling Hills Pipeline Improvement Project, project number 17046.
I'll move option 1.
Okay.
Second.
All right. We have a motion on the floor.
Okay. We will now open public comment on this item. If you are present in the boardroom and wish to speak, please come to the microphone and state your name for the record. Virtual participants may refer to the instructions provided on the first page of today's agenda. President Anzini, it does not appear that any member of the public is wishing to comment. Would you like me to call for the vote?
Yes.
Okay. We have a motion to approve a contract change order to Mozingo Construction, Inc. in the not-to-exceed amount of $608,696.40 for additional excavation, pipe diameter increase, additional appurtenances, and pavement restoration for the Strolling Hills Pipeline Improvements Project, project number 17046.01, moved by Director Dwyer and seconded by Director Penn. We're ready for the vote.
Yes. Go ahead, board members, and vote.
Okay. Motion passes.
Thank you.
So
Thank you.
Patrick, does this impact the expected lifespan of the pipe? You know, HCP's pretty beefy.
HDPE is very beefy. That's one of the main benefits to going that direction long-term, and something we're going to continue to explore with projects going forward.
So, just an aside, during the car fire up in Shasta County a number of years ago, there was a large diameter HTP used for acid mine drainage at the Iron Mountain site, the lowest pH recorded in the world. And during the car fire, that HTP line caught on fire and went into the mine at it, and was heading toward a load of iron pyrite and could have blown the top off the mountain. It was the worst case scenario, which I was involved in, and we're going, whoa! So, so check it out. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, now we'll move on to item number 11. Welcome back.
That's a Patrick.
Day.
Good morning again, Board. Patrick Calvis, Engineering Manager, presenting the Water Supply Assessment for the Gateway El Dorado Specific Plan. Some of these may look familiar. Previous board actions: in June 2021, the board adopted a resolution approving the 2020 Urban Water Management Plan. In April of this year, we all participated in a workshop for the 2025 Urban Water Management Plan. And then earlier this morning, we had the adoption of the 2025 Urban Water Management Plan. Summary of the issue. The county, El Dorado County, requested that the district prepare a water supply assessment for the Gateway El Dorado Specific Plan pursuant to Water Code Section 10910, which was enacted by Senate Bill 610. Water supply assessments are required for proposed developments that consist of more than 500 homes, 500,000 square feet of commercial retail space. There are other triggers as well that trigger a water supply assessment, or really any project, excuse me, that has a water demand equivalent to that of 500 homes. This specific project, the Gateway El Dorado Specific Plan, proposed 2 scenarios, A and B, both of which trigger a water supply assessment. Some background on the project. Where is it? What is it? You can see the approximately 100-acre site there in the figure. This is in the El Dorado Hills Business Park on the corner of Latrobe Road and Golden Foothill Parkway. What's being proposed is a mixed-use development. You can see with the different colors there called out, some research and development, some commercial space, some multifamily residential, some areas for parks and open space. I will point out the orange blocks in the figure, the 2 fronting Latrobe Road and the 1 further to the west. Those are currently flex spaces. So if it's multifamily residential, that would represent the scenario A that I mentioned for the development. And if it ends up being commercial, that represents scenario B. The project applicant and developer is Pac Trust, and they have funded 100% of the consultant and staff time for this effort. Continuing on background, now looking at the timeline. So in October of last year is when the county reached out to the district to begin preparing this. The following month, staff received bids through the on-call RFP process and issued a contract to Dudek. Between November and February of this year, staff worked to complete the final draft water supply assessment. And over the next couple months, district and county staff worked together to gain concurrence on the final form of the water supply assessment. And we are here today looking for adoption of the water supply assessment, which will then be transmitted to the county for their use. So a little bit more information on the specific proposal of the land use, corresponding acreage, and corresponding dwelling units and square footage. You can see in the table, I will call out the 3rd row under the rezone parcels. That's where that flex space is annotated here. So if it ends up being multifamily residential, that area would be 355 dwelling units. If it ends up being commercial, it would be 160,000 plus square feet of commercial space. And then on the totals in the same table, you can see at the bottom both of those scenarios, A and B, lined out. The current land use for this area is all research and development. A general plan amendment led to a change in land use, and adopting the specific plan would amend the zoning and allow for a mix of uses as proposed. And this water supply assessment was triggered by the proposed rezone of the parcels. I'll also call out on the totals there, you can see how the square footage exceeds that prior trigger of 500,000 square feet that I noted in a prior slide. So why did I bring up the urban water management plan in the previous board actions? It's because the water code explicitly allows for the plan to serve as a basis of analysis for a water supply assessment if it's determined that demands of the project were included in the urban water management plan. For this effort, the 2020 Urban Water Management Plan was used as the basis for the assessment based on the timeline of when the request, which was last October, was received from the county. At that point, the 2025 plan was not yet developed to a point where it could be referenced for this water supply assessment. However, in the conclusion of this presentation, we will tie it back together as we did confirm it with the 2025 plan. And it was determined that project demands for this project were included in the 2020 Urban Water Management Plan within the projected new customers section of the El Dorado Hills region. The project demand, which I'll show on the next slide, is 201 acre-feet per year and represents approximately 6% of the projected 3170 acre-feet per year of new demand expected by 2045 in just the El Dorado Hills region. So looking at the project-specific demands, we'll start with the table on the bottom there. As I mentioned, the total demand that was used for the analysis was 201 acre-feet per year. You can see both scenarios lined out. Scenario A, where that flex space results in multifamily residential, is the maximum projected demand, and so that's what was used. Scenario B would be the max commercial demand. The build-out demands, the 201 acre-feet per year, are conservatively assumed to occur by 2030 and run through the planning horizon of the document and really indefinitely. I wanted to give some background on the unit demands that were used to arrive at the 201 acre-feet per year project demand. So where applicable, again, the Urban Water Management Plan is used as the source of that unit demand factor. I highlighted that as well in the prior public hearing for the plan, and that's one important reason why nailing the Urban Water Management Plan is important for the future. However, for the commercial and research and development space for this particular project, due to the unknown future tenants and businesses that may make up that space, instead of making assumptions on that or assumptions on the number and size of water service connections that may serve that area, we decided to use a more conservative factor that was sourced from EID's design standards. And so that's what we've got called out there, that 2.4 acre-feet per year per acre. You'll potentially recall from the presentation earlier today, the Urban Water Management Plan factors are based on per connection. So in order to use that, we would have had to make some assumptions, and so we went with a conservative route. As I mentioned, this project was determined to be included in the new customers section of the 2020 Urban Water Management Plan. You can see if we look at 2045, according to the 2020 plan, we projected 4,600 acre-feet of new water. Of that, 3,170 acre-feet is expected to occur in the El Dorado Hills region. And of that, the 201 acre-feet for the particular project here is approximately 6%. So looking at our conclusions, to be comprehensive, we'll look across both cycles of the Urban Water Management Plan as well as the specific conclusion for this water supply assessment effort. Accordingly, for the 2020 plan, looking across all different supply scenarios, a normal year, a single dry, and importantly, a multi-dry year scenario, it was determined that the district has a surplus of over 11,000 acre-feet per year available into 2045. Similarly, for the specific conclusion of this plan, it was determined that the 201 acre-feet per year, the district, has sufficient supply to meet the projected 201 acre-feet per year, again, across all of those supply scenarios. And then circling back to the 2025 Urban Water Management Plan conclusion, we heard earlier this morning that in year 5 of a multi-dry year period in 2050, we expect to have over 9,000 acre-feet of available surplus. So right there is kind of a quick comparison between the 2020 and 2025 plan. But really, ultimately, the takeaway is positive that, yes, we do have enough supply to provide for this project. Your board options are presented there, and staff is recommending option 1 to adopt the water supply assessment for the Gateway El Dorado specific plan.
I'll move option 1.
I'll second with a comment. I think the regulatory process for these decisions is pretty much mandated. If we do the research and it shows we have the water available, we cannot deny connections to the developer. And I say that because I want to make it clear that we're not supporting the developer. We're simply saying we have sufficient water to support this project that the Board of Supervisors has the authority to approve.
Point made.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Sorry. Does the zoning allow for some water-intensive activities such as crypto or data centers, just saying that, which would bump up the water usage? Do you have any,
Yeah, I mean, so the proposed development is a mixed-use development, so whether it's commercial or R&D, I think that kind of covers the gamut of whatever may be proposed there. But at this point, we don't have specifics on what businesses may or may not come into that area.
I'm just curious, concerned down the road
Yeah.
of high water-intensive uses under the current or anticipated zoning, so.
Yeah, I won't go there. I was going to make a comment, but it's really outside our purview. But those are very legitimate question, because we could be blindsided with a data center coming sometime to El Dorado County, and they are very high energy and high water use
and-
projects.
Yeah, well, Amazon tried.
And the Amazon
And that went
project-
down.
That was zoned R&D, and Amazon was trying to
Right.
do their distribution through there, so yeah. But that's, again, not within our purview.
I say good luck with that if they try.
And I would just add from a water supply perspective, so
Right.
water supply assessments do not have an expiration date.
Right.
They, they can be used, if a development doesn't actually materialize within a certain number of years, a water supply assessment can still be referenced if it's determined by the purveyor that it's still relevant. So if we look at a projected demand of 201 acre feet per year, nothing happens for 10 years, and then we do see something come in that's proposed to have a much, much higher projected demand, the district does have the right to basically say, hey, we need an updated water supply assessment because the original one doesn't really cover what's being proposed at this time.
Correct.
Thank you. That gives me a little more, makes me feel a little more comfortable. Thank you.
Yeah, so for this effort, what triggered the water supply assessment was just the rezone, not a proposed, actual business coming in.
Yeah, and we also have representatives on LAFCO. So, we have voice as a board, but that doesn't mean we have the strength to, or even the decision to take the accountability. There are other things that are involved with that. So, anyway, thank you very much.
Yep.
There's a,
We have a second.
yeah, we,
First and a second.
okay.
We'll now open public comment on this item. If you're present in the boardroom and wish to speak, please come to the microphone and state your name for the record. Virtual participants may refer to the instructions provided on the first page of today's agenda. President Anzini, does not appear that any member of the public is wishing to comment. Would you like me to call for the vote?
Yes, please.
Okay. We have a motion to adopt a water supply assessment for the Gateway El Dorado specific plan, moved by Director Mansfield and seconded by Director Dwyer. We're ready for the vote. There we go. Okay. Motion passes.
Thank you very much. Okay, we will now move on to review of assignments. We don't have any. I just have a follow-up question. A couple board meetings ago, we received a visit from Janine, one of our ratepayers from Pollock Pines regarding glyphosate.
That's correct.
And I sent a letter to you because she's been working very diligently on getting information.
And we are scheduled to bring an item back on April 22nd to present. Sorry. My brain's off there. June 22nd to
Okay.
discuss it. And we've let the customer know that we will be doing that, so she's welcome to attend if she would like.
Okay.
But we're going to have a presentation on everything that we found
Beautiful.
for the board, yes.
Okay, that's excellent. Any other items? Any other questions? All right. So I will adjourn this meeting. We'll see you in 2 weeks.
Okay.
Thank you all.